May 16, 1980, midnight, Moscow. Vnukovo Airport. Through border control walks a man, disguised from head to toe, dressed in a foreign pilot's uniform. He walks confidently, his face is calm. But inside, his heart is ready to burst out of his chest, because he is not here alone. At this exact moment, about 100 meters away from him, a heavy diplomatic cargo container is being loaded onto a plane. And inside this dark, cramped box is his 5-year-old daughter under the influence of sleeping pills, and his wife suffocating from wild fear. One single mistake, the slightest suspicion from a border guard, and all of them will be shot right here. This man is not an ordinary pilot. This is KGB Major Viktor Sheymov, the man who held in his hands the main secrets of the Soviet Union and the ciphers of all Soviet intelligence in the world. All closed communications of the Politburo and resident agents passed before his eyes, one of the most important officers of the KGB. So why did one of the most influential and strictly guarded officers leave everything behind and put his family's life on the line? What pushed a man, who was at the very top of the system, to such an insane step? To understand this, let's start from the very beginning. Initially, Viktor Sheymov was not an enemy of the system, but its reliable pillar. He was born in 1946 in the very center of Moscow, into an elite family of scientists. His father was a brilliant engineer, his mother a famous cardiologist. From childhood, Viktor's brain was wired for complex analytics and mathematical schemes. Right after graduating from a prestigious technical university, he gets a job at a closed institute that develops guidance systems for space and ballistic missiles. Such a flawless background and technical genius immediately attract the attention of KGB recruiters. In 1971, Sheymov is recruited into the most closed, most secret structure of the KGB, the 8th Chief Directorate. This department protected the government communications of the entire Soviet Union and created new ciphers. His career took off like a rocket. In just a few years, from an ordinary employee, he turned into the main troubleshooter, a specialist responsible for the encrypted communications of all Soviet embassies abroad. Sheymov received the rank of KGB Major when he was barely over 30. What did Sheymov believe in back then? He considered himself the chosen elite of a great power. He sincerely believed that working in the KGB meant protecting the motherland, and that the Soviet Union was the fairest state in the world. A brilliant future awaited him, general's shoulder straps and a huge apartment in the center of Moscow. He was a perfect cog in this system. But there was very little time left before this flawless illusion shattered into pieces. Why did Sheymov drop everything? Because working in the 8th Directorate meant that you saw the dirtiest, most classified secrets of the state without any filters at all. The first deep disappointment came when he saw the corruption and hypocrisy of the highest elite. The Soviet propaganda on TV and the real picture in secret reports were two completely different worlds. But this was only the beginning. The real point of no return was the death of his best friend, Valentin. Valentin was also from a KGB family, but he openly spoke about the internal rot of the system and did not hide that he wanted to leave the agency. And then one day he dies under mysterious circumstances. The official version was an accident, but Sheymov conducts his own internal secret investigation and uncovers the terrifying truth. His friend was killed by his own colleagues, the KGB itself. At this exact moment, Viktor Sheymov clearly realized one thing: to tell the truth and be honest in this system is a death sentence. The KGB was no longer an agency protecting the country. It had turned into a punitive machine that quietly eliminated its own people. After this, even more terrifying documents start falling into his hands. Details of the operation to assassinate the Afghan leader Amin, plans for an impending assassination attempt on the Pope, the use of church leaders as agents. He realized that all this time he had been serving a terrorist organization. Many will ask, why didn't he just write a resignation letter and quit? That was Sheymov's tragedy. He couldn't just leave. He was the man who knew the communication ciphers and the main secrets of the entire KGB. Resigning automatically made him a target. They would never leave him alive. The system backed him into a corner, and he realized that there was only one way to save himself and his family. Not just to escape, but to destroy this system from the inside, to deal it the heaviest, most crushing blow. But to bring down the system, Sheymov had to take the first step, and reaching out to the Americans while being in the center of Moscow, tightly monitored by the KGB, was pure suicide. The chance came in the autumn of 1979, when he went on a business trip to Poland, to Warsaw. Although Warsaw was also strictly controlled by the KGB, it was still abroad, and there was at least a little freedom. October 31st, evening. A movie screening for employees is taking place at the Soviet embassy. Sheymov, following a pre-prepared plan, pretends to have severe stomach cramps, warns the guards, and goes into the restroom. As soon as the door closes, his movements change sharply. This is a scene straight out of a Hollywood thriller. Sheymov takes out pliers, which he had hidden behind the toilet tank the day before, and begins to unscrew the grate on the window. Then he takes out a small capsule hidden on his body containing $50. This was a stash for a taxi and unforeseen expenses. He quickly glues on a fake mustache and beard and puts on dark glasses. At the exact moment a passing truck distracts the Polish policeman outside for a couple of seconds, Sheymov jumps out of the window and melts into the dark alleys of Warsaw. Freedom. Right now, he has broken free from control. His heart is pounding, adrenaline is off the charts. Everything went perfectly. Now he could just go to the airport or train station and escape to the west. But he didn't do that. Why? Because Sheymov is not a cowardly fugitive, but a brilliant strategist. He goes straight to the United States Embassy and demands a meeting with the CIA station chief. When contact is made, the Americans offer an excellent option. We will take you right now, immediately. But Sheymov cuts them off. No, I will not go alone. He understood perfectly well. If he escapes alone, the KGB will ruthlessly take revenge on his wife and 5-year-old daughter left in Moscow. They would just let them rot in prison. His goal was not just to save his own skin, but to smash the system to pieces while keeping his family alive. So he gave the CIA the toughest ultimatum in their history. And, having made a deal with the Americans, he returned back to Moscow, right into the KGB's lair, as if nothing had happened. He walked toward his possible death on his own 2 feet. Contacting the CIA in Warsaw, Sheymov didn't beg. Please, save me. He set conditions. And these conditions shocked American intelligence. He had 3 specific demands. First, his wife and daughter must absolutely be smuggled out of Moscow. He's not going anywhere alone. Second, United States citizenship and security guarantees. Third, $1 million, so he wouldn't have to worry about anything for the rest of his life. Why did he set such strict limits? Because Sheymov knew his true worth. The information in his head was worth billions of dollars to the CIA. He acted not as a victim, but as a player on an equal level. Plus, he knew that escaping alone meant a death sentence for his family. The problem was that the CIA had never in history extracted the family of a high-ranking KGB officer from the very heart of the Soviet Union, from Moscow. This operation was considered simply impossible. But the value of the information at stake was so great that Langley, the CIA headquarters, agreed to take this risk. So, Sheymov returns to Moscow. For half a year he lives by a thread, leading a double life. By day, the perfect KGB major. By night, a secret CIA agent under the code name Sapphire. But how to meet with Americans in Moscow under total KGB surveillance? They find a genius solution: the legendary huge open-air pool, Moscow. Why exactly there? The noise and splashing of water left no chance for directional microphones to eavesdrop on them. All the people walk around in swimsuits and trunks, which means it's impossible to hide a camera or a voice recorder under clothes. And conducting surveillance through thick steam in a crowd of people was incredibly difficult and inefficient. It was in this pool that he secretly met with the Moscow CIA contact David Rolfe. The Americans give him a tiny Tropel camera and ask him to prove his status. Risking being shot every single day, Sheymov photographs the most secret KGB documents, encryption keys, and passes them to the Americans. When the CIA developed these films, they finally realized what a golden fish they had caught. Now he had to be pulled out at any cost, alive and unharmed. The escape operation was named Skutopia. The CIA and Sheymov chose the day extremely carefully. May 16, 1980. Why exactly Friday evening? Simple psychology and mathematics. If you disappear on Friday evening, your bosses will only start looking for you on Monday morning, and that gave a full 48-hour head start for the escape. To confuse the KGB, Sheymov left a brilliant false trail. They spread a rumor among the neighbors that they were going out of town to their country house for the weekend. And although they were leaving the apartment forever, everything was arranged as if the owners had stepped out for just a minute. Half-finished tea stood on the table, a red newspaper lay there, dirty dishes were in the sink, and the refrigerator was packed with food for a week. The most valuable items and family heirlooms remained in their places. If KGB officers entered the apartment, the thought of an escape shouldn't even cross their minds. On Friday evening, the family arrives at a secret location in a special CIA car. And this is where the most terrifying, most dangerous stage begins. The one we talked about at the beginning of the video, Vnukovo Airport. Viktor Sheymov is disguised beyond recognition and dressed in a foreign pilot's uniform. And what about his wife Olga and 5-year-old daughter Elena? The girl was injected with a special sleeping potion. She fell fast asleep, suspecting nothing. Then the sleeping girl and the conscious but trembling with terror wife are hidden in a cramped diplomatic cargo container and locked from the outside. Airport, control zone. Sheymov walks past his own colleagues, KGB border guards. One wrong step, the slightest suspicion, and the lives of all 3 will end right there. But he maintains icy calmness and crosses the border as a foreign pilot. What about the containers? Since the cargo had the status of diplomatic mail, Soviet customs officers had no right to open and inspect it. So the heavy boxes with living people inside were safely loaded into the plane's cargo hold. Only when the plane left the ground and broke through the clouds did Sheymov close his eyes and exhale deeply. They had broken out of hell. Meanwhile, the KGB leadership in Moscow was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware. Sheymov's family safely reached America. Under the Witness Protection Program, they received entirely new names and settled in a closed house near Washington. It seemed that this whole nightmare was left behind. But what was happening at this moment in Moscow, at the KGB headquarters? On Monday morning, Sheymov does not show up for work. The alarm is raised, and task force immediately breaks into his apartment. And what do they see? Half-finished tea on the table, a fresh newspaper, a fridge full of food. All valuables are in place. The complete feeling that the people are about to return home. Seeing this picture, the KGB leadership makes the biggest, most stupid mistake in its history. Why? Because right at that time, the scandalous Zhdanov case was making noise in Moscow. Very recently, police officers brutally murdered KGB Major Afanasyev in the subway. Frightened by this incident, the bosses make an erroneous conclusion. Sheymov and his family were killed by bandits, or those same ruthless police officers on their way to the country house, and their bodies were buried somewhere in the forest. But most importantly, they did not even entertain the thought that this family could have escaped to America. Accordingly, the KGB does not change a single global communication cipher. They thought everything was secure. And at this time, Viktor Sheymov, who according to their version was rotting in the forest, was sitting in America at a closed CIA base and methodically destroying Soviet intelligence. He reveals that the KGB had walled listening devices and bugs into the concrete walls of the United States Embassy being built in Moscow. The Americans had to completely demolish this building before they even moved in. He hands over lists of KGB agents in the West. But the most terrifying thing? Thanks to the blind mistake of the KGB leadership, the United States National Security Agency read all the secret correspondence of the Soviet Union all over the world like an open book for 5 whole years. It was the deepest knockout in the history of the Cold War. It seems everything went perfectly, right? But did Sheymov get his coveted $1 million? No. The CIA paid him only a tiny fraction of what was promised, about $200,000. The American intelligence agencies reasoned simply, he's a refugee from the Soviet Union, this is enough for him, where else is he going to go? But they still hadn't understood who Viktor Sheymov was and what kind of character he had. He was not the type to let people wipe their feet on him, even if it was the CIA. Did the CIA think they could cheat Sheymov and just keep the money? They made a fatal mistake. Sheymov was a man who brought down the Soviet system, and he had absolutely no intention of becoming an obedient slave to the American system. In 1991, he took an unprecedented step, unthinkable for world history. He sued the United States Central Intelligence Agency. By law, suing over matters of espionage and secret contracts was simply impossible. But Sheymov showed an iron grip and fought them in court for 10 long years. In the end, he forced the CIA to settle and pay him compensation. This fact perfectly reveals his personality. He refused to be a victim of any system, whether it was the Soviet Union or the United States. In 1990, when the Soviet Union was already bursting at the seams, he stepped out of the shadows for the first time in 10 years. And even then, fearing KGB hitmen, he came to the press conference wearing a fake mustache and a theatrical wig. Later, he founded his own company in the field of cybersecurity and began creating new, dynamic technologies to protect against hackers. His intellect worked flawlessly in any environment. But do you know what the most terrifying irony of this story is? In the late 80s, the FBI agent responsible for Sheymov's safety in the United States was Robert Hansen. They communicated closely, even became friends. Sheymov had no idea that the man protecting him was actually Moscow's top mole, a spy who had worked for the KGB for 15 whole years. A reasonable question arises. If Hansen was a KGB agent, why didn't he turn Sheymov in or eliminate him? Actually, Hansen sent a full report about him to Moscow. But by that time, the KGB already knew from other sources that Sheymov was in America. However, assassinating a man on United States territory, and under tight FBI protection at that, would mean provoking a colossal international scandal for the Soviet Union. Therefore, the KGB couldn't get to him. And Hansen just kept playing his role without giving himself away, and right before his arrest in 2001, he even tried to get a job at Sheymov's company. The absurdity of the spy world in its purest form. Viktor Sheymov passed away in October 2019 at the age of 73. Did he regret what he did? Never. Until the very end of his days, he believed that through his actions he saved thousands of lives and stopped the strikes of a punitive machine. What does this story teach us? In the collision of two superpowers, two giant machines, a person most often turns into an ordinary pawn. But Viktor Sheymov refused to be a pawn. He saw the internal rot of both systems and wrote the rules of the game himself. He is the only man in history who single-handedly activated the most destructive information weapon.